Hi, it's me, the storyteller. Thank you for joining me. Most of my stories on this channel are based on actual events, and some aren't. I'll let you decide if this story is fiction, or if it's not. Ozark, Missouri had a way of folding into itself once autumn arrived. The trees lit up in fire-colored leaves, and the air turned cool and sweet like apple cider. The town's rhythm slowed just enough to notice the crunch of leaves underfoot, the smell of distant bonfires, and the way headlights shimmered against low-hanging fog. In this particular October evening in 2018, it was homecoming night, the kind of night meant for nostalgia in the making. 4 teenage girls had just left the high school football field, still buzzing with school spirit and the kind of youthful energy that came from feeling like the night belonged only to them. Bethany Mills was at the wheel of her matte black Jeep Wrangler, the de facto ride for her tight-knit circle. Kara Kramer rode shotgun, with Mariah Collins and Shanice Taylor in the back seat, heads leaning out the windows, hair tangled in the breeze. The parking lot had been a chaos of taillights and teenagers, so Shanice mentioned they should take the scenic route home, back roads that wound through woods and fields. Bethany agreed that it wasn't about saving time. It was about dragging the night out just a little longer. The girls weren't in any rush to return to real life. Their music played loud enough to drown out the wind, and for a while, the Jeep was a capsule of joy, speeding down Cades Road. But somewhere in the spaces between the songs and laughter, something changed. Bethany had spotted a red Honda Civic in her rearview mirror, about 10 minutes back. Close enough to notice, but not quite alarming. At first, she hadn't thought much of it. Country roads didn't offer many options for other drivers, but as the turns came and went, the Civic remained behind them, mirroring each swerve like a shadow stitched to their bumper. The girls were in mid-conversation when Bethany's attention snapped to the mirror again, her smile faltering. She turned down the music. The sudden silence cut through their joy, and for a moment, confusion lingered. Mariah made a comment about the mood shift, but it was Shanice who noticed Bethany's tension. Bethany brought up the Honda Civic behind them. Kara tried to dismiss it, insisting it was probably nothing, just another car headed in the same direction. But Shanice had grown up hearing stories from her father, a former military mechanic who drilled survival tactics into her head. She remembered one in particular. If you think someone's following you, make 5 random turns. No normal person will follow every single one. So Bethany put it to the test. 1 turn, then another. Right, left, right again. No matter how absurd the route became, the car following them was always there. Headlights slicing through the dark like they had purpose. Panic crept in. They weren't being paranoid. They were being stalked. The girls exchanged looks, their excitement from earlier now rotting into anxiety. Bethany's hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles pale. Kara tried to suggest slowing down, hoping the Civic would pass. But when they did slow down, it slowed too, maintaining its distance like it was studying them. The road narrowed, and the tall pines that bordered either side began to sway with the promise of incoming rain. Overhead, clouds boomed like bruises in the sky, and far-off thunder murmured low and ominous. Then, without warning, the Jeep's dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. Alarms beeped. Warning lights flared. The engine coughed once, then died. The vehicle rolled to a halt on the shoulder, headlights flickering. Bethany turned the key. Nothing. No power, no sound, not even the hazard lights worked. It was as if the heart of the Jeep had been ripped out. They sat in stunned silence, trying their phones, but no one had a signal. In fact, all of their phones were curiously dead, as if their cell phone batteries ran out at the same time. The Civic rolled to a stop about 50 feet behind them. Bethany asked if anyone could see who was inside, but no one could. A second later, the Civic's high beams exploded into the night, flooding the Jeep's interior with a blinding white light. The silhouettes behind the glass vanished. All they could see was the glare. Then came the sound of rain. Slow, deliberate raindrops tapping the windshield. Tension cracked. One of the girls screamed. Kara's breath came in shallow gasps as panic overtook her. Bethany slammed her horn, holding it for 10 seconds straight, but the Civic answered back, matching hers with a long, blaring honk that seemed to echo through the woods. Whoever it was taunting them. Then, without explanation, the Civic pulled forward, tires grinding against the wet gravel as it crept past them. But before relief could set in, it stopped ahead, made a 180 in the road, and began to creep back, stopping directly in front of the Jeep, now facing them head on. Whatever this was, it wasn't random, more deliberate. At that moment, survival overtook logic. The girls bailed from the Jeep and sprinted into the nearby field, feet trampling tall grass, legs moving faster than thought. The forest beyond loomed like a fortress of shadows. Bethany led the charge, Kara close behind, Shanice following them. They ran without looking back, but when they stopped to catch their breath at the tree line, they realized there were only 3 of them. Mariah was gone, nowhere to be seen. The trees swallowed them. Branches clawed at skin and clothes as they tore through the underbrush, fueled by panic and primal instinct. Somewhere behind them, the Civic's engine rumbled low. Bethany, Kara, and Shanice didn't stop until their chests felt hollow and their lungs like fire. When they finally turned to regroup, expecting to see all 4 of them, Mariah was still missing. What began as horror turned into disbelief. Bethany spun in circles, scanning the darkness. Kara whispered Mariah's name over and over, her voice dry and fraying. But Shanice just stood still. Too still. Her eyes fixed on the tree line, as if watching something unfold that the others hadn't noticed yet. Then they saw it. Down near the road, barely visible in the distance, a tall figure trudged through the rain-soaked grass, carrying something slumped over one shoulder. The shape was unmistakable. A girl's limp frame. It was Mariah. The Civic's headlights flared again. The figure opened the back door, shoved the body inside, and climbed in. In seconds, the car disappeared down the road, swallowed by fog and rain. None of them screamed. They didn't have to. The soundless collapse of their world said it all. They ran again, this time not to escape, but to survive. Nearly an hour later, soaked to the bone and trembling, they stumbled onto a remote farmhouse, tucked behind a grove of dying oak trees. The porch light cast a dull yellow glow, and the door opened before they even knocked. An older couple, alarmed, confused, but gentle, brought them inside, wrapped them in blankets, and called for help. By the time deputies arrived, their parents were already on the way. News spread like a storm surge through the town of Ozark. A girl was missing, probably taken, maybe worse. The questioning started immediately. Inside the warmth of the farmhouse, with space heaters buzzing and rain tapping against the windows, officers tried to piece together a story that didn't make sense. They asked about the car, about the driver, the road, the Jeep, the field. The girls gave answers, some clear, others wrapped in uncertainty. Bethany described how the vehicle shut down without warning. Kara recounted how the Civic stalked them, how it never once passed. And Shanice, she played her part with quiet composure, nodding at the right moments, giving nothing away. She stayed close to Bethany's side, her tone calm but careful. Almost too careful. If anyone noticed the slight delay before she spoke, the way her gaze flinched when they mentioned Mariah, they didn't say anything. Investigators towed the Jeep out the next morning. The engine was cold. Systems were unresponsive. The battery was intact, the fuel clean. Nothing made sense. Then the forensic team noted something unusual, a strange metallic scorch pattern along the vehicle's frame. like an electrical burn. It didn't match any known failure modes, and it hadn't originated from inside the Jeep. Later, a technical analyst with military experience was called in. He examined the damage and quietly suggested something few were ready to believe: an electromagnetic pulse, EMP. A military-grade EMP could kill an engine mid-drive, destroy a phone's ability to call out, even knock out modern electronics within a 2-block radius. But where would a civilian get access to something like that? The suggestion hovered like smoke in a sealed room. No one could prove it, but no one could rule it out either. By the end of the week, the missing persons case had gone national. Mariah's face smiled from flyers stapled to telephone poles, bus stops, and gas station windows. Candlelight vigils were held at the football field, where she had spent time with her friends just hours before her disappearance. Social media feeds flooded with prayers, sightings, and conspiracies. Still, there was no trace of the red Honda Civic. CCTV surveillance footage from nearby intersections turned up nothing. No license plate numbers, no witnesses. It was as if the car had never existed. Yet Bethany and Kara remained adamant. They'd seen it. They'd watched it all happen. And so had Shanice. But as time passed, small things began to gnaw at Bethany. The night after the incident, she had trouble sleeping. Her mind kept circling one detail: how calm Shanice had been when everything went wrong. How quick she was to suggest the turn test. How she had said nothing when they lost Mariah. Bethany remembered thinking at the time that maybe she was in shock. But the more she replayed that night in her mind, the more it didn't sit right. There was also the issue of Shanice's phone. When police returned the girl's belongings, Shanice's device had been completely wiped. No messages, no call logs, not even browser history. She'd claimed water damage erased everything, but Bethany had seen her clutching it protectively in the field. It hadn't been wet. It had been working earlier at the football game. They took selfies and everything. Bethany told Kara her suspicions. At first, Kara refused to believe it. Shanice had been their friend since elementary school. She would never. But then came the voicemail. A week after the incident, Mariah's mother received a call from a blocked number. She thought it was just a spam risk, but they did leave a message. She played it back. No one spoke on the line. It was just faint static, like a bad radio signal. But buried in the distortions was a voice, just a few words, quiet, strained, almost broken. It was Mariah. Could she still be alive? Or was it just some heartless prank? The voicemail was grainy and low, distorted by something synthetic, like it was scrambled deliberately. Audio experts that the family hired struggled to isolate it, but after hours of filtering and amplifying, a whisper emerged beneath the layers. It was Mariah's voice. She sounded scared, exhausted. She said only 5 words. "Don't trust Shanice. He's watching." When the audio played in the sheriff's office, no one moved. The room thickened with disbelief, suspicion, and dread. That single sentence cracked open a fault line beneath the investigation, one that had been quietly ignored until now. The officers called Bethany and Kara in for a second round of interviews. This time, the questions were tighter, focused, and personal. How long had Shanice known Mariah? Were they close? Had there ever been any tension? Bethany and Kara exchanged glances. They admitted what they had heard in the past. Shanice occasionally talked about how Mariah always seemed to be at the center of everything. Teachers loved her. Boys followed her. Even Shanice's ex, Marcus, had briefly dated Mariah a year ago. This was the first thread. Once tugged, more began to unravel. The law enforcement tech unit subpoenaed metadata from Shanice's school laptop. At first glance, her device looked clean, a little too clean. No homework assignments, social media, no emails, no browsing history. But forensic recovery tools don't need permission. They dug deeper. What they found was a rabbit hole no one expected. Weeks before the disappearance, Shanice had visited multiple anonymous message boards and private servers hosted on the dark web. The logs pointed to encrypted chats on black market forums frequented by fringe hackers, mercenaries for hire, and ex-military operatives. One username, Daggerfall, kept appearing in the threads. Conversations between Shanice and this user discussed obscure technologies, signal scramblers, cellular jammers, and most disturbingly, portable EMP emitters, devices capable of disabling vehicles and communications, illegal in all 50 states, traceable to no one. More disturbing still were the inquiries of, quote, making a person disappear. The conversations were short, calculated, but one stood out, sent just a week before homecoming. The date is set. I'll make sure she's alone. Bethany couldn't breathe when she heard the truth. Shanice had set them up. Not just Bethany or Kara, but Mariah. Specifically her. The night of the football game, Shanice had insisted they all ride together. She had also suggested the back roads, and casually mentioned stretching out the night, as if it were her idea all along. And when the mysterious car appeared, she never panicked. Bethany remembered the look on her face during the chase. No terror, no confusion, something else. It seemed to be control. The town of Ozark braced for any new updates. Within 48 hours, the FBI was called in. Armed with the metadata, chat logs, and Mariah's voicemail, they obtained a warrant and stormed Shanice's house in the early hours of the morning. Her bedroom was minimal, spotless, but inside a hollowed-out section of her closet floor, agents discovered a locked metal briefcase containing a prepaid burner phone and a laminated map of Christian County with a red X marked on a rural property north of Springfield. The FBI rushed to that location. It was an off-grid cabin, no electricity, no running water. The man living there inherited the land and disappeared from public records nearly 5 years earlier. When the agents ran the prints found on the burner phone, they matched a man with military clearance, a dishonorably discharged communications tech named Hayden Cray. The username, Daggerfall, was his. Officials scoured the off-grid cabin late that night. Hidden deep behind layers of brush, barbed wire, it sat in a silent hollow, surrounded by hand-dug trenches and motion-triggered cameras. The windows were blacked out. No visible lights. No sound. Inside, the air was stale. The place was lined with signal jammers, power inverters, and makeshift surveillance feeds showing the roads leading in. And in a small locked room in the back of the cabin, barely more than a walk-in closet, they found Mariah, disoriented, weak, but still alive. She had been kept there for 9 days. No windows, no clock, only silence and darkness interrupted by the low buzz of electronics and the occasional voice outside the door. Shanice's voice. She had visited twice, not to comfort, not to feed her, just to look at her, to remind her that this was punishment, that she finally understood what it was like to be invisible. Around the 5-day mark of Mariah's ordeal, Hayden had allowed her to use the restroom. Apparently, he had gotten distracted by something on the cameras. He ran outside to investigate. He had left his cell phone on the counter. That's when Mariah took the opportunity to call her mother. That's when she left the voicemail. Soon after Mariah's rescue, Shanice was arrested on multiple counts of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and aggravated endangerment. Hayden Cray faced federal charges for the use of classified technology and unlawful detainment, plus aggravated endangerment of a minor. Months later, the courtroom was packed for the first hearing. Shanice didn't have any emotion. She didn't even look at her friends. In fact, she didn't speak at all. But later, in a recorded psychiatric evaluation, she finally admitted why she'd done it. She said she was tired of being the background character of her own life, tired of Mariah's perfect image, her perfect smile, the way people bent around her like gravity. The plan wasn't supposed to go that far. She just wanted to scare her, humiliate her, show her what powerlessness feels like. But then Hayden offered more: a safe house, a clean job, a chance to make it permanent. Shanice's jealousy was too great. She couldn't resist, and Ozark would never be the same. The fields where they once played, the hangout areas in high school, the football games, everything looked different now. Dimmer, quieter. People whispered, locked their doors earlier, watched their children more closely. Mariah eventually transferred schools. Bethany and Kara visited her often, but something had changed in all of them. An innocence had been taken, not just by the terror of the night, but by the realization that the greatest danger hadn't come from the outside. It had been sitting beside them all along. Months passed. Spring returned to Ozark, brushing new green all over the hills and back roads that had once been soaked in fear. People smiled again at gas stations, restaurants, and school resumed its rhythms. Time, as it always does, moved forward. But not for everyone. Mariah still had trouble sleeping, afraid of what silence might hide. She sometimes woke up gasping, convinced she could still hear the faint hum of electronics and the low shuffle of footsteps behind the wall. Bethany's Jeep sat untouched in her parents' garage. Her father refused to sell it, said it might be evidence someday, even though it already told its story. And Kara? She didn't talk much anymore. She started writing poetry no one else read. She became a recluse. But it was Shanice that haunted them all. Her trial ended in a conviction, as did Hayden Cray. They both would serve decades. And yet, sometimes, just sometimes, Mariah swore she still saw Shanice in a crowd, behind her at the grocery store, sitting 2 rows back at church, always watching, just out of focus. It was irrational, impossible. But fear doesn't need facts to exist. It only needs a shadow, a whisper, a glance held too long. On one sunny day in the summer of 2019, Mariah received a letter in the mail. It had no return address, but inside was a single Polaroid photo. It showed her sleeping in that closet where she was kept for 9 days, blurred and washed in twilight. Curiously, she flipped the photo over, and what was written on the back shook her to the core. In scribbled handwriting were 3 words: "We weren't finished." If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel. Give it a like, a comment, and maybe a share. But if you didn't like the story, maybe share it with someone you don't like. In any case, I'm glad you stuck around to the end.